are joined today by Salina Meah, who of course is a communication specialist, who of course has a previous career which I will not go into too much detail about because I have stalked her. I know I've stalked her a lot, but I need to ask her the questions and not tell you guys everything, because if I do that, then obviously it won't be much of an interview, will it? But how are you today?
I'm fine. I'm really glad to be here. It's so lovely to be here in this studio again. Usually I'm behind the camera.
Yes, we're talking about that. But before we do go into obviously your career, like now at the moment, we're going to talk about a bit of the start from what you did. So I understand you were a designer when you first
That's
came out of
right. I
university.
studied graphic design. Art was definitely the thing I enjoyed the most. Though I did do psychology, I did do English, and I did do sport in lots of different ways. Decided to do graphic design, and I started as a designer for a language company, which is still going, and lots of publications and lots of kind of newspapers and magazines and editorial, and then moved into marketing.
And what was that gradual change like? I mean, why did you decide to go into marketing?
It was because I found that marketers couldn't really explain the substance of what we were doing as designers, and the messaging and the narrative, and it all just became about sales. And I was able to communicate that better to clients and to prospective partners, and so I kind of just naturally moved into that without leaving the design bit behind.
You took that element of it with you.
Just took it all.
And I can see the shirt. I really like the shirt today. Very vibrant. I do realise I'm wearing black. I never wear black. You guys know this, but I'm probably the most dullest person on the show today. But I promise I have more clothes in the wardrobe. But moving on, of course. I mean, is it something that you bring into your daily life, like design, like fashion-wise, or just the work that you do? Is it something that stays with you all the time?
It is. I used to think it wasn't a conscious decision. I used to feel like, oh my God, you know, trying too hard in one area. But actually, as I've kind of gone through my career and matured, it's more irrepressible. Like, I can't stop it now.
No, of course, of course.
You know, you have to express yourself in the most authentic ways, and if that's through your profession, if that's through your hobbies, if that's through, you know, how you like to appear in the world.
Definitely.
And you've got to do what feels right for you. Right.
So I understand you've worked in public health a bit, the messaging side of it. Can you tell me a little bit about that work?
Yeah, so I was really privileged to have NHS as a client, and also UK government, and a lot of the public health messaging over the last 3-4 years, and I'm still working with an NHS partner, because there's a lot of things that fall through mainstream campaigns. Yes. There's a lot of nuance that is lost in some of the messaging that needs to be really targeted, needs to be really direct, and get people thinking or behaving differently.
So when we say messaging, what do you exactly mean? I mean, I'm thinking a text message, but what does that actually mean?
Campaign messaging, adverts, messages from your doctor, and things that are put out in response to what's happened recently with Keir Starmer.
Yes.
Is telling the public what's going on and what to do about it. And as I said, with a lot of you know, communities that we have, and certainly Asian communities, Muslim communities, Bengali communities, they're not always spoken to in the right manner.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're not always,
I agree.
They're not always spoken to directly enough about the issues that really affect us.
Right.
And so it's really important. That's something that I feel very passionate about. And so I want to make sure that's right, especially when I've got such high stakes clients.
Of course. And I mean, given that this is a show on a Bangladeshi channel, what is something that affects us Bangladeshis just generally? If you
there's a lot of health issues that go kind of not talked about in our own communities, but also not reflected when we go to the GP.
So would you say mental health maybe?
Definitely mental health. A lot of things that happen to us earlier in our you know, 40s and 50s that happen later in other groups and English groups and audiences, but certainly the mental health aspect is something that we're lagging behind in, purely because, you know, our parents and our grandparents didn't have the benefit of being able to talk about their mental health. So those conversations are things that they don't know how to have or don't recognise, and it's not skills that they've passed on. So we have to acquire them from somewhere, and that's why I want to help people connect with better mental health.
Definitely.
Through either therapy, hypnotherapy, or martial arts, and taking care of themselves, or in the wider domain, and doing that really in the external way of making sure that there's messaging that they can understand that affects them and they can take action.
Definitely. And now with sort of the campaigning aspect of it, how much success have you seen in it recently?
Oh, I think it's a difficult one to say, to be honest,
Yes,
because
of course.
it's really drip feed.
Yes.
There has to be a sustainable way to communicate to people like us. It can't just be a one and done or one campaign or one health issue. So when that happens, it is successful, and you see an uptick in screenings, or you see an uptick in calls, or people going to their GP first rather than ignoring signs and changes in their body that they should be aware of. So it is working, it just needs to be sustained.
Definitely. And I mean, now that you look on your career, I'm sure it's a very long career, of course, but would you say out of the work that you do right now, it's played a bigger impact in your lifestyle that you've had?
That's a really good question, because I've got to the age where it does affect me.
I think it affects everyone, any age it affects everyone. Like, I'm 25 and all I get is messages. I'm like, oh, I need to do that, and I just ignore it. I put in the delete box. I can't be bothered.
Oh,
but,
fantastic!
Yeah. I'm trying.
That's great.
I really try, but it's just with the influx of messages. I think with the messages that come from either the NHS or the government or whatever it is, it's just I try and put it aside, and I try and ignore my health, and I put everyone else before me, which isn't a great thing.
But that is exactly why we need it more, because we ignore it because we've got busy lives, and only gets busier, and so definitely has really kind of impacted my own health and the way I think about my own health, because we're so used to taking care of our parents, so used to taking care of our families. You always delete the text that you get, and you always remind your parents of the things that they need to do.
Yeah,
so
definitely. And in the work that you do currently, of course, what would you say is the best thing that you've done? Like, maybe something that you take back and you're like, you know what, I'm so proud that I did that.
Oh God, do you know what?
I'm sure there's so many examples that you have. I know of a few, but I'm trying to interview you. I'm not trying to say the answers for you, but go on.
There's particularly one thing. When I went to work for the Barefoot College in Salina in India, and I did that as a kind of a marketing and branding person, to help them with fundraising and to start off some of their wellness initiatives for women and children they had in the rural parts of India. But as I always try and maximise what I get out, but also what I can give back, I started teaching self-defence to the women and children there. And I was poo-pooed and I was pushed back, and I had my proposal shoved back in my face. God. But I was really persistent, and I did one class and had a few people. I did a second class and had more, and then by the end of it I also included men. So it's really important to be visible, and it's really important to be present.
Definitely.
And to show a different type of way that you can be.
Definitely.
That's not always reflected in mainstream media.
No. And I mean, we're talking about martial arts just before the show, but we tried not to go into too much detail because I was like, oh, we need to talk about this on the show. But why do you think self-defense is like? Why do we need to learn about it, especially as women? I think my mum was like, maybe you should pick up a hobby because you don't have enough time. But generally, why is it so important to maybe go do martial art classes or learn something like that?
I think self-defense is slightly different from martial arts, but because of that aspect, where I think self-defense is like swimming. It's a life skill. You should know how to do it because you might need it in certain situations, just like swimming. So I think it should be taught earlier. I think it should be taught from primary school age. But specifically now, with the way things are going in the world and the certain behaviours that are prevalent in certain groups, I think it's really important to do what you can for yourself, to empower yourself, and make sure you're taking care of yourself in all the ways. Go to your doctor's appointments, go to the gym, but also make sure that you can take care of yourself in certain situations if they arise. Definitely.
I did write one question which I wanted to ask you, and it was, how do you ensure the work that you're doing reflects the people it's meant to serve? So not just the message, but actually the process as well?
Oh, that's really interesting.
I did write that down.
And I think it's something that a lot of people don't do, because they get given some data, and they get given some testimonials, and they have messaging and they put it out, and then it's only the numbers that change. I've always been really invested in community, and I think it's the thing that really brings us together, is making sure that we can, like I said, you need to care about each other, you need to make sure you're caring about yourself. And is talking to the community, talking to the people, being really interested in what happens and being really curious as to why certain things aren't working or why certain messaging doesn't land. So for me, it's just far too personal.
Of course.
It's never just a statistic. It's always someone's life that can be saved or improved.
If you don't mind me asking, what made it personal for you at the time when you made that decision? You know, you want to go down this route, to have a career, you know, in communications. Why did you decide, okay, this is personal for me?
Oh God, I think I'm just so passionate about things,
Right.
and I just saw a massive gap, and I wasn't able to have a two-way conversation with people about these things. Back in the time when I was studying, many moons ago, when I was studying, when I was an up and coming designer and marketer, I was always asking these questions like, why haven't we done this for this group of people? Why aren't we getting feedback from this group of people? Why is there a whole population of people we're not listening to? And there was never really any answers, and no one really wanted to speak to me. And so I've been steadily working my way to make sure that there are answers, and there are there is a trail. There is something that you can follow, because you have to make sure certain people are spoken to in different ways, and there's a process and there's a methodology, and it's there for a reason. And people are, we're all different, and we're all trying to do our own thing. But at the end of the day, there's certain behaviours and certain mindsets, especially in the South Asian community.
Yes, I agree. I'm thinking of my mum and dad right now.
Exactly, and it's generational.
Yes.
So, you can do that. You can make sure you're speaking to different people at different points and about different things, and get that consensus, make sure you're doing the work. But yeah, it's just I'm too interested in people to just leave it there.
Just out of curiosity, of course, the way we speak to different generations obviously is very different. Like, for instance, if you talk to a Gen Z, you speak differently. When you speak to your parents, you speak differently. And so when you do the communications, does it vary from messages?
It does. When it's done well.
Yeah.
Absolutely
Obviously,
it does.
yes.
No, I think that's a really good point, because we think, again, we like to homogenise, and we think, these certain people have always done this, and especially with, things in the NHS, with government, they've always been this way.
Yeah.
Actually, no, we've got a whole other group of people who are much younger, who've grown up in a different environment and are used to digging out information for themselves. They're curious and they want to know, so we have to speak to them differently. And certainly, respect and formality shouldn't fall away just because you're speaking to an older generation.
Of course.
So yeah, those things need to be integrated into whatever comms you're doing.
Definitely. And now that you've obviously gone from a designer to working as a communication specialist, if you had to reflect on your career, what would you reflect on specifically? What would you change if you had to change anything? Not that you have to, but if you did want to change anything.
I think your previous guest made a really good point, is that you've got to enjoy it. You've got to love it. And that's the thing about mental health and digging deeper, because like design and things like that can be very superficial.
Yes.
But it's just going to be meaningless, and it won't resonate with your audience, and it will be hard for you to sustain if it's only very surface level.
Okay.
So I think that's the thing, is just find out what really matters to you, and make sure you can bring that to whatever role you're performing.
Definitely. But if there was one piece of advice that was different from the first guest, what would that be? I'll put you on the spot for this one.
Yeah, you have. I'm not sure, because I'm not sure if I would ever want anyone to do exactly what I've done.
They don't have to do it. I think it's about reflecting on what you've done, but maybe someone else can use it differently. I know every single time I speak to someone, I'm like, wow, I should use this advice. And it helps.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be specific to your career, anything.
No, I think the best thing you can have, especially now when there's a plethora of information out there, there's so many sources and there's so many voices, is to have your own perspective and be curious about the way you think about things and how you receive things, and have that internal conversation. Is to question yourself as much as anybody else. So definitely is to have your own perspective on things, and don't be afraid to share that.
Right. And those who do share their opinions and then obviously get, I guess, dissed for it, or they're like, shouldn't say anything at all because I know what's going to happen. Like, for instance, in Parliament, what's going on right now.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Keep going, keep going. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do, and it's only going to get harder. And actually, we're lucky enough to kind of be on the other side of 20, 30, 40 years of activism, of protests, of people pushing back. So keep pushing.
Definitely. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.